Welcome to Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Amanda Bowen, and today is September 30th, the last day of September in 2021. We will go ahead and get to the weather because there's plenty to discuss today. First of all, we have some flooding potential in the next 48 hours focused on the panhandle. As we'll see in a bit, we've got a strong system that's going to be moving in, bringing lots of heavy rain as well as wind. And with that, we've got a couple of different concerns as far as flooding. The yellow area on the map in the northern panhandle, we're looking at the chance for minor river flooding as well as some urban flooding in concrete covered areas. The area in green from Juneau south, we're looking at significant rises and high water in those areas, so maybe not any actual river flooding, but still some potential for rapid rises on rivers and some high water in those areas. And then for the Sitka area, we are looking at localized flooding as well as the threat for landslides. That heavy rain is going to be coming in, and again, combined with the potential for high winds, that is going to significantly increase the landslide risk, specifically in the Sitka area. So if we look at our watches, warnings, and advisories map, we see a lot of orange for the panhandle, and that's because most of the panhandle is covered in watches at this point, a number of different watches. We have a high wind watch for most of the panhandle. That is going to be for Friday into Friday evening, and that is for winds gusts up to about 70 miles per hour. Those winds are going to be out of the southeast, could bring down trees and power lines, and widespread power outages are possible. Now, in addition to the high wind watch for most of the area in the panhandle, we also have a flood watch that's going to be in effect for much of the northern panhandle. The areas on that flood outlook map that we saw in yellow and green, Juneau, as well as the northwestern panhandle, we're looking at 3 to 6 inches of rain in a 24 to 36 hour period. So that's obviously going to bring some rapid rises on rivers and creeks, as well as the chance for some localized aerial flooding. And then finally, there is a flood watch, flash flood watch in effect for the Sitka and Port Alexander areas, and that's where we're going to see that greatest chance for landslides. Not that landslides can't happen anywhere else, but particularly that area tends to be favorable for landslides in these situations. We'll have a little bit more from the Juneau Forecast Office itself about those threats coming up. Looking at the mainland, we have a number of winter storm hazards coming up over the next couple of days. In orange, we have winter storm watches for both the northeastern Brooks Range and the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, where there is the possibility for heavy snow Friday all the way through Saturday. And that heavy snow is likely to cause reduced visibility as well as difficult travel as it accumulates quickly. Basically the same story for the eastern interior from the 40-mile country down through the eastern Alaska range. 2 bouts of snow expected, one shorter bout on Friday through Friday evening, and another longer bout Saturday morning all the way through part of the day on Sunday. Expecting heavy snow in both of those situations, with difficult to possibly near impossible travel, depending on exactly how heavy the snow is, and then through the eastern Alaska range, how high the winds are. Winds could get as high as about 35 miles per hour, which can cause visibility to be reduced to near zero when you're also dealing with heavy snow. The yellow areas on the map for Fairbanks and the western Alaska range and the Denali area are winter weather advisories for Friday all the way through Sunday afternoon. And so again, we're talking about 2 different bouts of snow, one on Friday, one Saturday into Sunday. Lighter snow for those areas, but still the concern for some difficult travel as that snow accumulates. As we look at our satellite imagery, we can't quite see yet the system that's going to be bringing all of this hazardous weather, but we do see the cloud bands in the southern Gulf just starting to hint at that system that's going to be coming in. Across the mainland today, we can see some clouds with some light snow across the eastern interior, and we also have a low pressure system in the western Gulf that is bringing some precipitation to the Alaska Peninsula as well as into the Kodiak area as well as the Kenai Peninsula. So if we look at our surface chart for today, we see that low pressure system near Kodiak Island bringing rain to Kodiak Island and snow to the higher elevation of the Alaska Peninsula. We also have some showers moving into the Panhandle today and a slight chance for thunderstorms in the southern Panhandle. For tonight, not a whole lot of change. We still have that low hanging around, but we can see our next low that's going to be strengthening very fast coming up into the southern Gulf. So by the time we get to Friday, that low is down all the way to 961 millibars. There's a chance that low could drop below 960 millibars. So a very, very strong low pressure system coming into the Panhandle and bringing all that weather. We also have troughing over the mainland, which is going to be part of the forcing for that winter weather across the mainland and North Slope areas. Heading into Saturday, we get behind that strong system. We still have low pressure in place, still some rain and snow showers in the area, and we will still have that potentially hazardous heavy snow over the eastern interior, but a little bit more of a break for the Panhandle with that rain turning more to showers. Taking a look at temperatures for Friday morning for the southern and southeastern portion of the state, we've got 40s in the Panhandle and 30s across South Central, so actually a little bit warmer than we've been seeing the last number of mornings where it's been quite cold. Friday afternoon, with all of that rain and wind in the Panhandle, not warming very much. Some temperatures topping out right about at 50 degrees, such as in Juneau. And then for South Central, just a few degrees cooler, temperatures in the 40s. Saturday morning, a little bit cooler for both the Panhandle and South Central. Temperatures in the Panhandle still in the 40s though, and dropping to probably just below freezing for South Central and the Kenai Peninsula. Saturday afternoon, we are looking at a little bit cooler behind that front in the Panhandle with temperatures topping out in the upper 40s to around 50, and also some mid 40s for South Central on Saturday. Friday morning across the north, we are looking at temperatures in the 20s for the North Slope as well as 20s for the interior and the West Coast. Our lowest temperature there at Anaktuvuk, about 11 degrees on Friday morning. Friday afternoon, 30s almost across the board except for in the Brooks Range, where of course that's our cold spot when we get up into the 20s. Saturday morning, we are looking at 20s again across the board, a couple of degrees warmer on the Seward Peninsula with Wales there maybe not even dropping below freezing. Saturday afternoon, hitting 40 in a few spots, 38 there in Fairbanks, and still 30s for the North Slope. And for the southwestern portion of the state, we are looking at Friday morning temperatures in the 20s mostly, some areas struggling to get below freezing, such as the Kuskokwim Delta there. Friday afternoon, we're looking at temperatures just in the 30s, so quite cool, but not too dissimilar from what we've been seeing. Saturday morning, once again, temperatures dropping down into the 20s. And finally, Saturday afternoon, temperatures once again in the upper 30s. And now we have an update from our National Weather Service forecast office in Juneau.
Hello everyone, I'm meteorologist Cody Moore with the National Weather Service in Juneau. I wanted to give everyone an update on the storm force low forecast to impact southeast Alaska this weekend. Currently we have high wind watches posted for much of the central and southern panhandles, including Juneau, Sitka, Ketchikan, Prince of Wales, for wind gusts of up to 70 miles per hour Friday night into Saturday morning. On top of this, we have storm force winds expected in along the outer coast from Cape Decision to Cape Fairweather. Also storm force gusts expected in southern Clarence Strait, southern Chatham Strait, southern Sumner, and southern Stevens Passage Friday night into Saturday. This is going to be a major event for marine areas. So if you have any marine interests, please prepare now for the possible impacts. On top of the winds, we have the flooding threat. We have a flood watch in effect for the Icy Strait corridor, including Gustavus and Juneau from Friday into Saturday morning, where 3 to 5 inches of rain can fall. Also on top of that, we have a flash flood watch in effect for the Sitka area from Friday evening to Saturday morning for 3 to 5 inches of rain, plus the possibility of landslides. The mixture of high winds and the heavy rain will create conditions conducive for the landslide potential across the outer coast, including the Sitka area. This is a rapidly evolving storm, so stay up to date on the latest forecasts at weather.gov/Juneau.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to a look at your aviation forecast, starting with flying weather on Friday morning. We have IFR conditions out ahead of that low in the Gulf, stretching all the way from the northern Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island, across the Kenai Peninsula and Prince William Sound, and all the way through the Panhandle. We're also looking at an area for a chance of thunderstorms on Friday morning in the Prince William Sound area. We also have IFR conditions along portions of the North Slope around Utqiagvik and the Chukchi Sea coast, with MVFR conditions through the Brooks Range, Alaska Range, and much of the immediate west coast. For Friday afternoon, we see some improvement to MVFR conditions for the Alaska Peninsula, Kenai Peninsula, and Prince William Sound, but continuing IFR conditions for the entirety of the Alaska Panhandle. Also some IFR conditions developing on the north side of the Alaska Range and stretching northeast to about the Yukon River. And IFR conditions along the North Slope spreading to the entire North Slope area north of the Brooks Range. For Saturday morning, we see IFR conditions relegated to the Panhandle associated with that system in the Gulf, but also some IFR conditions along the immediate west coast, as well as the Chukchi Sea coast, the Beaufort Sea coast, and just north of the Wrangell-St. Elias Mountains. Saturday afternoon, we have IFR conditions for much of the North Slope away from the Chukchi Sea coast, as well as IFR conditions in the Alaska Range and the eastern interior. And finally, we still have some IFR conditions in the very highest terrain of the Panhandle for Saturday afternoon. Pass conditions for Friday, AKwx Pass looking like MVFR all day, but we will see some IFR conditions developing as the day goes on along the north entrance to AKwx Pass. Adigan Pass, same story, MVFR through the day, but IFR conditions developing on the north side through the day. Lake Clark and Merrill passes both starting the day at IFR with some improvement to MVFR during the afternoon. Rainy Pass the opposite, starting at MVFR and deteriorating through to IFR during the afternoon hours. Windy Pass as well as Isabel Pass, both MVFR during the morning and deteriorating to IFR in the afternoon. Mentasta Pass flipping again, starting IFR in the morning and improving a little bit to MVFR during the afternoon hours. Tanita Pass also starting IFR with a little bit of improvement to MVFR in the afternoon. And Portage Pass also starting IFR and improving a little bit to MVFR in the afternoon. And Portage Pass is where we will see that slight chance of morning thunderstorms Friday morning. So definitely keep an eye out for that if you have any plans to be flying in the area of Portage Pass on Friday. Chilkoot and White Passes both expected to be IFR through the day on Friday. Our freezing level for Friday morning, our surface freezing level stretching all the way from the Bering Strait down the southwest coast, across south central and into the Panhandle. We've got 2,000 feet across the Bering Sea, across the Alaska Peninsula, and up into the northern Panhandle. And our warmest air, our highest freezing levels will be about 4,000 feet across the southern Panhandle, as well as 4,000 feet across the western Aleutians and even increasing south of the Aleutians. Icing is going to be isolated moderate, it looks like, in the area of that system coming on shore on Friday. So from about Prince William Sound all the way down through the Panhandle above about 6,000 feet. Expect some isolated moderate icing there on Friday. We have a very strong jet stream coming up into the Gulf and stretching across the Panhandle, that jet stream peaks at 150 to 155 knots, winds over the Panhandle itself around 90 knots. If we look at 9,000 feet, we have our strongest winds in that same area on the southeast side of the low, up to 85 knots of wind out of the west and southwest, and then even over the Panhandle itself, looking at 55 to 65 knots of wind out of the south at 9,000 feet. At 3,000 feet, basically the same story, very strong winds on the south and southeast side of that low, peaking around 85 knots out of the southwest, and even up into the Panhandle, as much as 55 to 60 knots of wind out of the south. So definitely a windy day for aviation across the Panhandle on Friday. And with wind, we get turbulence. So surface to about 5,000 feet, possibility of isolated severe turbulence over the Panhandle on Friday.
Greetings, gazers. This week, the moon is going to fly into the Gemini constellation, making it much easier to pinpoint in the sky. Hit the darkness around 2:30 a.m. looking east. You'll see a waning moon above the horizon, along with Gemini's primary stars, Castor on top and Pollux on the bottom. The moon will make a close approach of Pollux on Thursday, September 30th. Gemini is a U-shaped constellation named for the twin sons of Leda from Greek mythology. But in Roman culture, the stars were Romulus and Remus, the founders of Rome. And the Chinese stargazers associate them with yin and yang, the two forces of nature. Two stars, one constellation, lots of stories. As the constellation becomes more prominent throughout the winter, it's going to be even easier to spot. Just look up and over Orion's shoulder and keep looking up.
We're at Vandenberg Air Force Base. We're about 20 minutes before the launch of ICESat-2. You might see the white light off in the distance. That's the Delta II rocket.
It kind of feels like an idea that was always going to just stay an idea. But no, it's real. It's sitting on top of the rocket.
You know, and for me, it's kind of surreal. Like you say, it's been 10 years, and it's hard to believe. It's like, we're really here? This is really about to happen? It's totally cool.
This is Dr. Tom Newman. Over the years, his work has taken him to some pretty remote areas to study changes in the ice regions of our planet. And his research, among many others, has defined the goals of the new NASA satellite, the Ice, Cloud, and Land Elevation Satellite 2, or ICESat-2.
And we have ignition. And
The story of ICESat-2 really begins with ICESat-1. ICESat told us all kinds of cool things about the ice sheet and about sea ice that we didn't really know to ask. That data allowed us to measure elevation change of ice sheets in a way that we hadn't been able to before, and showed that all the action on the ice sheets, the places that were really changing quickly, were around the edges. So when we were thinking about what could we do better next time, we knew that was one key component.
In addition to the edges of the ice sheets, ICESat-2 needed to measure a dimension of sea ice that remained elusive: its thickness. To figure out how thick sea ice is, you can measure the height of ice sticking out of the ocean, or freeboard, and compare it to the height of water between the sea ice flows, called leads.
The problem is, sea ice is really dynamic, and those cracks open and close various places in the ice pack throughout the day, throughout the year. And what we need to do is have measurements of the ocean whenever it's available, wherever it occurs in the sea ice pack.
To solve that problem, ICESat-2 was designed with a fast pulsing laser instrument to take precise, near-continuous measurements across its 3 pairs of beams. For 10 years, everything about the mission was designed to measure rapid changes in the most rapidly changing part of the cryosphere. But it has to get into space first.
But it's a huge transition going from the ground to in space. We've spent better part of 10 years, thousands of people have been involved, and actually seeing the rocket there on the pad with all of that work kind of all put together in one place, it's pretty amazing. And then getting up in the middle of the night to go watch the actual launch, it's sort of surreal in a way, because you've put so much time into it for so long, and actually seeing it over there is like, whoa, you know, it's a big deal.
4, 3, 2, 1, 0. That's off. That's 1.
That was awesome. Totally cool. There it went. That was Atlas. Last Delta II, heading on out. So Atlas has been turned on over the course of the first few weeks of the mission, really culminating for us with the laser. So this is our first look at sea ice data from ICESat-2, and it looks fantastic. The signal levels look great. We've got plenty of photons there. We're capturing ridges. We can clearly see the ocean. All sorts of cool stuff in there, and this is just our first data. It's only going to get better from here on out.
The data from ICESat-2 is well on its way into digging deeper into the unknown dimensions of sea ice sheets, and glaciers. It will shed light on changes in sea level and global weather patterns, and once again find new things about ice we didn't know to ask.
So my heart is definitely racing. I don't know about anyone else's. This is the stuff nerds dream of.
Slight chance the flight may see ICESat-2 in their center windscreen. 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back for a look at your marine forecast, starting with the sea ice edge. We can see that we're continuing to see a little bit of ice growth in the protected areas right along the coast from about Point Lay up and over across the Beaufort Sea coast. We're also seeing a little bit of ice growth on the edges of the current ice pack. And as we're expecting northerly winds in the area the next few days, that will be favorable for additional ice growth on the edges of the ice pack. Taking a look at our marine forecast, we have a very strong storm force low coming into the Panhandle on Friday, with winds out of the south for the eastern Gulf anywhere from 45 to 50 knots, with gusts up to 65 or even 70 knots. So incredibly strong winds and high seas in the 20-foot range, 20 to 30 feet essentially on Friday. Even for the inside waterways, we're looking at 35 to 40 knot winds with higher gusts, as well as seas potentially as high as about 16 feet. Heading into Saturday, there's really not a whole lot of improvement. Those winds are coming down a little bit in the eastern Gulf to 35 to 45 knots, but look at those seas continuing to come up as those winds remain elevated. So we're looking at seas anywhere from 25 to almost 35 feet for the eastern Gulf on Saturday. And even for the inside waterways, we're looking at wind gusts out of the south and southeast up to as high as 50 to 55 knots. So obviously this is a scenario that does not happen very often for the Panhandle. And if you have any marine interests, please make sure that you are preparing now for this storm, because Friday and Saturday are going to be very intense weather-wise across the marine areas of southeast. Now, with that storm making landfall in the Panhandle, other areas will see some increased winds and seas, but not like we're seeing in the Panhandle. So for South Central, we're looking at winds 25 to 30 knots with seas in the teens. We will have some offshore flow through that area near the Barren Islands, so winds increasing there to 40 to 45 knots. Heading into Saturday, that offshore flow increases even more. So winds near the Barren Islands 45 to 50 knots with seas highest as you head further offshore east of the Barrens, peaking around 20 feet. Elsewhere, winds and seas 20 to 30 knots in the Gulf, with seas still in the teens, but winds and seas coming down a bit, especially in Cook Inlet, where we're looking at just 2 to 4 foot seas on Saturday. For Friday, for the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island areas, winds 30 to 35 knots out of the northwest. We've got our strongest winds in the area of Kodiak Island. Strongest seas, though, looking like they'll be in the Bering on the north side of Cold Bay, seas around 16 feet. As we head into Saturday with that offshore flow increasing, we'll see our strongest winds and highest seas on the east side of Kodiak Island. Winds up to about 45 knots out of the northwest. Through Shelikof Strait, could see some gusts up to 50 knots on Saturday. Friday in the Aleutian chain, we're looking at our strongest winds and highest seas in the eastern Aleutians, winds around 30 knots, seas in the teens. For the western Aleutians, a little bit of a calmer area with winds only around 15 knots and seas 10 to 12 feet. On Saturday for the Aleutian chain, we see the winds for the western Aleutians come up a little bit, switching to out of the southwest at 25 to 30 knots. Still winds around 30 knots for the eastern Aleutians out of the northwest. And for the west coast on Friday, we're looking at some gale force winds out of the north, 35 knots, with seas 10 to around 13 feet, just 5 feet in Norton Sound though. And for Saturday, winds come down just a little bit, 25 to 30 knots out of the northwest. For the Arctic coast on Friday, we're looking at winds 20 to 30 knots, 20 knots across the Beaufort Sea and peaking around 30 knots on the north side of the Bering Strait. And then on Saturday, 25 knots along the Beaufort coast and 20 to 30 knots for the Chukchi Sea, with 30 knots on the south side of the Bering Strait. Reviewing the weather that we're looking at that very, very strong low pressure system coming into the southeast on Friday, 961 millibars, incredibly strong. So there we have all kinds of flood watches and high wind watches in effect for there, as well as winter weather watches and advisories across the interior. Thanks so much for watching Alaska TV Weather.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.